This is The Recap, a weekly reflection on the sermons of Fellowship Baptist Church in Mainville, Ohio, seeking to help you make Jesus essential in every aspect of your life. I'm your host, Ryan Land, and I'm here with the preacher of this week's sermon, the prodigal son, Brent Wilson.
He returns.
Welcome back, Brent, to The Recap.
Thanks, man. When I was growing up, my dad, anytime I would sleep in really long, I'd come out out of my room at 11 or something. That's what he would always say that to me. He'd look at me and say, "The prodigal son returns."
And you're like, I didn't go anywhere. But you did go somewhere the last couple of weeks.
Yep.
And so we missed a week last week, and then me and Darcy were on the podcast 2 weeks ago. So, but now we're back in proper form. And we're here talking about treasures in heaven, end of Matthew 6. But before we get to that, I gotta warm us up.
Break the ice.
And so we're talking about treasures, and talk about temporary versus eternal treasures. But this is something me and Darcy have talked about before. If your house caught on fire and it looked like the whole thing was going to burn down, it's like you can't say nothing's going to be saved. Everything living gets out. So dogs, cats, kids.
Don't worry, I wouldn't have gone for the cat.
I just want to get out there. What are the three things you're grabbing from your house?
Oh, it's a great question. I know the first one immediately. So I bet
I know it.
What?
Is it a guitar?
Yeah. So my grandfather's guitar, this Martin, it's like a 1950-something Martin, is both valuable in and of itself and has a great sentimental value. For me, I used to play it at the tire shop growing up. When I was working at the tire shop, when no cars were coming in, I'd pull it out and play it. And so having that just has a lot of memories associated with it. So the Martin guitar will be one. It drops off really quickly from there. So I don't know, maybe my gaming computer, just because it's pretty expensive. However, there's another weird factor in this.
It's like insurance.
The insurance might get a new computer. Maybe pictures, but those are all digital now. So it's not I feel like the classic answer is the photo
family
album.
Photo album. Yeah.
It's we don't have those.
Yeah.
Really.
So one of my answers is there's this, me and Darcy have this picture that we took on a Polaroid, and it is on our full body mirror in our room.
Yep.
And so I always tell her, always when we talk about this, I always say I'm going to save that because I think it's probably the only picture of us that is not digital.
Yeah.
So I'd probably save that.
Yeah.
But I also have, the reason I asked three is because I have two things I want to save at least, because I also have a signed cast photo of the West Wing. And I would like to save that too. So I didn't want to just have to choose one.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. After the guitar, I've got multiple guitars, so maybe more guitars, but
Brent coming out of his house with 3 guitars in his hands.
I don't know that I could come up with three things. Really, those are the first two that come.
That's probably safest, is to just go in and grab one and get out.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
So in this hypothetical situation, so then let's that's temporary treasure. The things in our house. Let's talk about our treasures in heaven. So we're here in Matthew 6, getting towards the end. This is the back half of the Sermon on the Mount now. Lord's Prayer is right in the center. And just kind of wanted to ask you, give us kind of the context of what, the flow of the Sermon on the Mount. Why is this, coming up now, I guess is the question. How did Jesus lead into this? What's the focus, I guess?
Well, yeah. So, if you're just thinking through the structure, you've got the Lord's Prayer, and so you have this idea of praying for our daily bread. You have this idea of fasting, of giving up things, and so you have stuff somewhat in the context. And then after this, what we're going to be actually looking at this week in this "Do Not Be Anxious" section, you also have this context of who's going to provide the stuff to you. And so how do we think about the stuff matters. And he's saying, look, stuff here, temporary, going to rot, going to pass away. You need to be thinking about stuff that lasts forever. And so it's just really in a whole section that's a little bit about stuff.
Yeah. And even before the Lord's Prayer, you have the, giving
being
generous with stuff. Yeah. Another thing I just kind of noticed when I was prepping for my sermon last week, is this recurring theme of like the Lord giving like rewards, like the Father rewarding you.
Yep.
And then you have like this kind of dual, like your physical needs, your physical money, your tangible money, I don't know, your real money, whatever. But then you have this, reward coming from heaven. And so, but I think you're right. Pointing to the anxiety thing and what's come before is like, I think the first half has been about people, like relationships, like behaviors. How do you,
and how we reflect to the world. So be salt, be light.
Yeah.
Those sorts of things.
And now it's more about our
relationships.
Stuff,
And the Lord's Prayer being situated in there too is because it's like how you relate to God, your Father, the provider, the one who's going to keep you from temptation, the one who's going to deliver you from evil, all these things. And then how that like is going to connect to the stuff a lot, particularly in this next anxious section.
Yeah.
So that's all connected.
No, that's good. It's just like, you don't want to miss the puzzle piece, because this all comes consecutively for a reason.
Yeah.
So it's like, I think it's helpful to think like, where do we come from? Where are we going?
Well, yeah, and it's just like when you get to this anxious section for this coming week, the first word is therefore.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So it's like because of everything we talked about when laying up for your treasure, therefore don't be anxious.
Yeah.
If your focus is on treasure in heaven and not treasure on earth, there's going to be less. Like if your priorities are right, you're not going to be anxious. When your priorities are wrong, that's when we get anxious. When you're more worried about money, fame, beauty, status, relationships, whatever, you get anxious about those things. But if your priorities are on heaven, you're not.
Yeah. Man, I feel like that's a spoiler for next week. Ooh. I like that. So okay, let's run through these kind of three main points you had.
Yep.
I've got some questions I think that'll maybe help us guide our conversation a little bit. But so first, let's start out with just talking about the two kinds of treasure, temporary and eternal. You gave the hotel illustration, which I think was actually like really effective in my like I was in my like thinking about it. I was like, oh, like that makes sense. It's like changing the curtains or the bedspread or redoing the floor or whatever, like in a hotel room is so silly. It's like to pay the money to do the work. And it's like so much of what we do is, changing the carpet in a hotel room. And so like the question I asked is like, or I want to ask is like, what things do you see us doing, humanity, that is akin to that, that's like building up, renovating our hotel room instead of saving up for our permanent home, like what are some tangible things?
It's a really tricky question because the extreme answer is sell everything and be a hermit. It's like be a monk.
The Benedict option.
Yeah. And I think some things that we've said in other contexts, would contradict that, right? We've talked about a Christian worldview means we want to make things beautiful. We want to cultivate goodness and truth and beauty. And that means decorating our homes and tending our gardens and all these things and how those are work in creation. And so what we don't want to do is pit those ideas against each other.
Yeah. It's like what sometimes people call poverty gospel, right? That that you can only be really in touch with the life of following Jesus by selling everything and being poor.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think the scriptures don't say that. It's like even this week, money's not the problem. We're the problem.
Yeah.
Our relationship to money is the problem. And so ways we do this, I think like look at your calendar. How much time are you spending or investing in things that are fleeting, things that are, sports is a easy one to harp on, but it's like even in some sense in sports, you're investing in your kids, right? You're all the good things sports can do for a kid. So it's like you don't want to just throw the baby out with the bathwater on that. It's like how much time of the week do you spend on your phone just mindlessly scrolling? You're not investing in anything. Like how much time are we being lazy? just sitting around. I think it becomes really tricky, and so you're looking at your calendar, you're looking at your money. What are you wasting your money on? Like, I'm not saying it's wrong to go buy something that you're going to spend time with and enjoying. I think that's good. I think you should do that. Like, God is the giver of all good gifts. And so you want to go buy a board game and play a board game, go do that. That's great.
Oh, thank goodness. I do that a lot.
Yeah. But it's like, are you a spender, like on a whim? Like, you're just like, oh, I see, I desire, I get.
An Ariana Grande spender.
I don't know what that means.
I see it, I like it, I want it, I got it.
Oh, okay.
That's a song.
Yeah, like that probably unhelpful.
Yeah, or there's like this sense where people just buy stuff, and I think I've fallen victim to this as like a therapeutic kind of thing. It's you feel like a new person in a new pair of pants, or like a new pair of shoes or whatever. And so it's like, oh, like this will make me feel better.
Well, it's interesting you bring up clothes. I'm preparing for this week, and one of the things that Jesus talks about is this illustration of God providing, and it's like clothes. Don't be worried about what you're going to wear. And I read the stat earlier.
And Brent's like, I'm never worried about what I wear.
Never really. But I read this stat that like Americans like spend $4.5 billion a year on clothes.
On clothes? Yeah. I don't doubt it.
Such a waste. And in Jesus' time, people had one, maybe two outfits. And so that's not to say you can't buy clothes, have clothes.
Yeah.
That's why it's like this great tension. It's like,
for sure.
I don't want to point, it's not black and white. It's a little more gray.
Yeah.
It's like, so look at your calendar, look at your spending habits, look at the things that you are building. Do you go spend a whole bunch of time at the church building something that is going to matter? You're like, that's really good. That's a long-term investment. Are you spending a whole lot of time, I don't know, like on home projects? Like that can be good, but are you spending an inordinate amount of time?
Yeah.
Like you got to balance those things.
And I think a little bit too, this goes back to the motivation kind of idea. That's like, cause Jesus is talking about treasure, right? And so it's like what we're ascribing, like the value. It's like, is it worth $300 to buy this pair of pants or whatever? It's like there's the actual financial sort of valuation, but then I think there's like this internal valuation that we do on stuff to be like, this thing is really going to make me successful. And it kind of goes into what you talked about at the end, like this idea of the good life. And it's like, it actually is not about the money we invest, but it's like the end product we're trying to receive. It's like, oh, if my house is all nice and fancy and has all the best gadgets and gizmos and it all runs, and it's like, that's when I'll know, like, I've arrived. Like that's where like I find value. Or it's like in how you look and how you dress. It's like, that's where I find value, or how successful you are at a sport or whatever. So I think when you just start drifting into that camp of like, this is where you're finding value is in these temporary things. I think that's when you can get in a little bit of trouble too, outside of like the spend, like the actual spending of your time and money aspect of it.
Yeah. And just from a money perspective, it's like, hey, let's say you're a more wealthy person and you have a lot of money, millions of dollars invested somewhere. Like that's not wrong to invest your money, to have a lot of money, all those things. But are you taking some of that and giving it away, investing in people, helping churches, helping missionaries, helping, are you using your money in that way? Or are you just heaping it up, hoarding it?
Well, that's one thing you just said that kind of takes us into the, my next question is like, so there's these eternal we talk about these temporary treasures, these eternal treasures. And you talked about kind of two eternal treasures, like people and your character, like your personal character. And so I think, thinking about using your resources to either for yourself or to help others go and evangelize and make converts, like that's eternal, right? And so, if Christians are to live as like the kingdom of God is here, the kingdom of God is real and it's eternal, how do we then like shift our focus or shift our perception and practically kind of start living with that mindset of like, oh, I need to focus on eternal things, not just temporary things.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's certainly a paradigm shift. You have you have to tell yourself this regularly. You have to have this truth in front of you regularly. You have to have other people in your life who are doing this regularly. If you are alone doing it, you're not going to do it for very long. But if all the people you're surrounding yourself with are doing it, you're like, oh, I want to be a part of that. I want to do that too. And so all those things matter. But it's like, if you are constant, I mean, think about how we're always advertised to and marketed to. It's like when you are constantly submerged with ads and things you should buy and things you should get and things you should do, it's like, oh yeah, well, I'll go do those things.
For sure.
And so if you're not shifting the narrative in your mind with other things that are telling you, no, invest in these ways, invest in eternal things, invest in people, then you're not going to do it. And so you gotta shift what's coming in.
Yeah.
What comes in goes out.
And I, there's this sense of like what, and I think a question you can ask yourself is like, what imperishable things am I investing in? It's like in my own life, is my time going towards anything that's imperishable? Is my money going towards anything that's imperishable? Just think about the giving prayer. My relationships, am I leveraging my relationships into something that's imperishable? Or am I just building up a bunch of stuff for myself? So I think that's like a good place to start, is like go through those things in our giving prayer, like possessions, time, relationships, possessions, time, and money, and be like, what imperishable goals is this going towards in my own life? And not just focus on the perishable things. And it's like, but it's so hard. You're right. It's like, cause it's so hard because the way we gauge success or value in anything is by a perishable standard, not an imperishable one. Like our bank account or our, social status or whatever, our follower count, like all that's imperishable. Or I mean, all that's perishable. It's gonna be gone. But there's other things you can invest in that are imperishable, that are not going away.
Yeah, and I would say like we should ask ourselves, like, how many people did you share the gospel with last year compared to how much time, energy, effort, money did you spend on things that are not eternal? And most of us are going to say, I didn't share the gospel with anybody last year. How many people did you have an intentional discipleship sort of relationship with?
Yeah.
And most of you are going to say, well, nobody really. And so it's like, okay, so what are you doing? Like, writing a check is good, but it can't just be that.
Yeah, but it's like even that, is in a sense is perishable. Like just cutting a check.
Oh, sure, yeah.
It's like there might be a day when our church doesn't exist, but the gospel will exist, right? And a church will exist, and so, it's like even writing, like cutting the check is potentially perishable. It's like, so
certainly depending on how the church is using it.
Yeah. And so it's like, thinking, who can I invest in? Who can I, evangelize? You talked about having like an intentional like discipleship relationships. Like, what about just one intentional conversation that involves anything about your spiritual life, or your spiritual formation? It's like not even just one conversation. And it's like your fantasy team is only going to be here for however many months.
Well, that's a great point. Like, I think about how many conversations I've had about football, and it's been going on 4 weeks, and it's like I've not had that many conversations with people about Jesus. And that's a problem. Yeah. And so we should be more invested in talking to people about Jesus than we are football.
Well, just as like, cause I'm in the same boat, it's like, I'll wake up and I'll look at the scores and the highlights and the stats of teams I don't even care about.
Yeah.
And
it's not that that's wrong.
No.
It's just that the other should outweigh it.
Yeah. And like my desire is wrong. It's like my desire is to know all this random stuff about football, mainly so I can talk about it with other people. But it's like, what if I had the same desire to know some imperishable truth from God's word, or some imperishable doctrine that about who God is or what he's done. And it's like, so I can go talk about that. It's like, how do we build that desire in ourselves is, I think, one of the fundamental questions of discipleship.
Yeah. Well, and I think like sometimes you don't get to see it.
Oh, for sure.
Payoff, but sometimes you do.
Yeah, yeah.
Sometimes, I was talking about like people who like, oh, I this grandma kind of figure. Oh, I remember teaching you in the nursery. Right now, I see you here 25, 30 years later, following Jesus. Like I had a hand in that. Or like for me, like I think about people who 10 years ago were my youth or were in our kids ministry, and it's like we were investing in them, pouring in them, or I had a particular relationship with them, and see them come to wherever they are following Jesus. It's like, oh, that really matters. Like the things that I did or that God did in and through me have changed eternity. Right, because this person is now following Jesus faithfully. Yeah. Whereas maybe they wouldn't have been. Yeah. And so like that matters.
And like you just don't know, like you just said, like, and you may not ever get to see the fruit of that this side of eternity. It's like it's like you can't just say, well, I don't see any results from my laying up treasures in heaven. So also, how'd you miss a basketball joke this week?
Which one?
It's like a layup. Lay up treasures in heaven.
I thought about it.
It's easy. It's a layup. It's not a 3-pointer for heaven. It's a layup. No, I don't know. But yeah, it's like you're not always going to get to see. It's like the story you told about the dude that evangelized D.L. Moody, and then down the line you get to Billy Graham. Yeah. Which is like some people in that chain just didn't know. Oh yeah. Yeah, and so they never got to see their investment paid off, but they made the investment still. Yeah. Well, let's talk about choose ye this day whom you will serve. I think that's how the King James
probably
would say it. So your point, was the choice of masters. We're created to be ruled and must choose what master we will serve. You talked about Loki, but you didn't talk about one of the greatest worship songs of all time.
Oh,
You're Gonna Have to Serve Somebody by Bob Dylan. So that's the idea here, right? It's like you're gonna have to serve somebody. Yeah. So to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's interesting. You could talk about this in a way that blends a little bit with the treasure aspect, right? Or like an idol aspect. Like, oh, you are serving money. Money is your master, and I think that's a legitimate part of the conversation. If you zoom out a little bit, I think there are really only 3 options of people you can serve or things you can serve: God, the devil, or the demonic forces, or yourself. And it's like really, we're serving one of those things. And it may look like I'm serving money, but really I'm serving myself. Yeah, yeah. It may really look like I'm serving beauty, but really I'm serving myself.
Like
one of those
power,
things,
like political power.
Well, your master is either I want to be my own master, or I want the devil to be my master, or I want God to be my master.
Yeah, yeah. So why do you think? Because I think this is particularly hard for people in 2024, particularly in America, to be thinking about being ruled, to think about having a master. So it's like what do you think that is? What's in the air?
Our whole cultural DNA is about overthrowing a king. We got taxed too much and didn't like it, and so we went to war. And so we are all about individual liberty.
Well, I think you go even further back than that, right? It's like you have these people who couldn't practice their religion the way they wanted.
So they moved across the ocean.
Like, we out of here. We're sailing for 3 months across an ocean to go, stay or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's like, even back than that, it's like you have this individualism, like I'm not going to fit in the system, so I'm just leaving the system.
Yeah. And so, and I don't, it's definitely a Western thing, but we think and believe that we are the master of our own domain, and we can do what we want. And our decisions are in a vacuum, devoid of any sort of outside influence. There are voices, but I can parse all those. And then I'm this neutral arbiter here making a decision. And that's just false. Yeah. I'm not saying we don't make decisions. We do make our decisions, but we are so blindly influenced by our desires and spiritual forces and the world and the culture and our time. Like so much things we have no idea we're influenced by. And so
we're intaking, right? Content wise.
We are blind. Even knowing what I'm saying, still blind to it.
Yeah.
And so we just don't even really understand what master we may be serving at any moment, and so we got to really fight for that.
Yeah. So like how does like like this idea of like individualism, how do you like combat that, and how do you one, like this is just kind of for me, like how do you just like be at peace with that? Like how do you be content to not be an individual, to be to be a servant to a king?
Yeah, I don't necessarily have a great answer. I would say it's going to start with living in community really intentionally. Like if church is a building and an event you attend, you're not going to get there. If church is a family to which you belong, then that starts you down that path. And then it's just a Christian maturity thing. Like as you grow in that, and as it's like in Starting Point, I talk about this every third week or on week 3. Like as you're growing, when you're a spiritual child, you're selfish. Children are selfish. It's the world revolves around me. But as you grow in spiritual maturity, you get to a place where, I've started to realize my spiritual gifts and how God has wired me and how God wants to use me. And now all of a sudden I want to serve other people. And so I can make it less about me. It's like, but this is a huge problem in the church. Think about how often we say, hey, I'm leaving this church and I'm going to that church because I like the music over there better. I'm going to that church because he's a little bit better preacher. I'm going to this church because they got better food. Whatever, they serve coffee. That's really whatever.
We do that.
They got Coca-Cola. And it's just like, I didn't realize this was about you. But really it's about us. And so it's like one of the things I say a lot in Starting Point is we're not looking for a consumeristic type of church where it's like, well, when they stop providing the thing that I really want, I'll go find it better somewhere else. Like I'll switch from Kroger to Meijer. Instead, it's a covenant. It's like, hey, I am planting roots to build something for the long haul here, and it's going to have peaks and valleys, bumps and bruises, but we're going to lock arms together and we're going to build something for the kingdom of Christ. And slowly we get there, maybe.
Yeah. Well, and I think you've told this story in a sermon before about probably not even true, but it's like Abraham Lincoln, before he was president or something, he buys this slave and then frees her, and he goes, free to go. He's like, you're free to go. You can go wherever you want. And she says, well, I'm going with you.
Yeah.
Because you freed me. And so it's like, when you understand that you're going to be ruled by something, like you're going to have a master. It's like, once you're freed from your sin and you see how terrible that master was, it's like we're natural, like our hearts should long to follow Jesus, to be serving Jesus, to be apprenticing or discipling under Jesus. And so because we know how bad the previous master was and how good Jesus, good of a master Jesus is.
And also just like once you understand and believe that you are a creature created to be subservient to one that is greater than you, that you're going to worship and follow. It's like, okay, I'm created to have a master. Paul opens every letter by saying, I'm Paul, a slave of Christ. And so it's like, we are going to be a slave to something. Let's be a slave to the one who set us free. Let's be the servant to the one who set us free. Let's be the son and the heir who serves the one who is now our father. Yeah. And because we have to serve something. It's in our very nature. We can't not do it.
Yeah. Bob Dylan.
Yeah.
Gonna serve somebody. So, Jesus specifically talks about money in this, but what would you say are like some other like masters that we might serve, in that category of like myself? What are, besides money, what are some other things we might serve? And then like, what are the signs that point us to the thing we're serving? How do we diagnose that?
Yeah. The what is your vision of the good life. So it's beauty, it's popularity, it's money, it's power, it's peace, comfort, relaxation, it's security, any and all of those things and more. Whatever you think will make you content and at peace and arrived. And it can change. And the way you figure out what that is what you sacrifice to. We say we sacrifice our lives to God. but then we don't really.
Yeah.
And so what are we sacrificing to? The promotion. I'm working my tail off. I'm sacrificing to get more money. I'm cheating. I am working my tail off. We're sacrificing to get married. I'm spending all this money on nicer clothes, every dating site. I'm going, spending all my time.
My subscription, my dating app subscription.
Yeah, like just going above and beyond and trying to find somebody. Whatever the case was, whatever you're sacrificing to, that's the thing that is your master. That's your treasure. That's the thing that you think will make you happy.
Yeah. There's this website where you can like load in whatever list you want. And then, it brings up like a 1 versus 1, and you just pick which one you prefer.
Okay.
And then you do that over and over and over again. And then it gives you like a list, like a tier list of like, what was your number 1? What was your number 2? What was your number 3? So I've done it with like movies and, stuff like that, random stuff. But it's like almost like to diagnose, what are you?
Yeah.
It's like you put serve God and whatever he asks you to do up against everything else.
Yeah.
It's like, and then
if you were to answer honestly.
Yeah. And then it's like, be honest with yourself. And it's like, hey, is it serve God and do whatever he calls you to do, or,
win $1 million.
Well, yeah. Or like
Whatever.
win the Super Bowl or win, with the teenagers I talk about, it's like make the team, get the girl, get the boy, become an influencer. Right. I've done this exercise with him before where it's like, kind of like imagine the good life, imagine, you in the 10 years in the future and everything's going right. Everything's perfect. You've got all the friends you want, the spouse or the boyfriend or the girlfriend you want, the job you want, you won state, whatever, it's like everything went the way you wanted it to. And they said, hey, the person spoke to you from the future and they said, hey, everything started to go right when I dropped that Jesus stuff. It's like, would you do it, to have the life you imagine is perfect, and it's kind of like, so what it's like, and it's almost like you just get this, like, cause no one wants to self-admit. I was like, yeah, I'd give up Jesus to be the state champion or have a spouse or whatever. But it's like, you just feel like your heart just for a moment kind of be like,
maybe,
maybe. Yeah. And so I think thinking of those things, it's like, what would I be willing to drop Jesus for?
Yeah.
Even, just thinking maybe for a millisecond. And
similar, the question that I've heard that is always like really hard to answer is, what prayer, if unanswered, would make me really consider not believing in God? Yeah.
No, I think that's good. And I think that is revealing of what you're really serving, what you're really putting your hope in.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts on Mr. Dillon? You're going to have to serve somebody?
I don't think so. Is he still alive?
Bob Dylan?
Yeah.
I think so.
Okay. I have zero idea.
Man, but let me tell you, we had a lot of notable deaths this week.
This week?
Yeah,
sidebar. From girl from Harry Potter.
Maggie Smith, Dame Maggie Smith.
Yeah.
Pete Rose, Cincinnati
Rose.
Red. Agila Makumbo or whatever.
Who's that?
He was a basketball player in the 90s.
Okay.
He was on those commercials where he went, no, not today. Because that's what he would do. He'd block people's shots. Then he'd do. I don't know why I thought of that, but there have been a lot of notable deaths.
1 out of 1 people die.
Whoa. Okay. Well, that's actually not true.
Unless the rapture comes.
Jesus. Well, I guess he did die.
He did die.
Enoch.
1 out of 0.999.
Then there's a couple more, right?
Elijah.
Enoch, Elijah.
I think it's just those two.
Okay. Yeah, Jesus did die, though.
Yeah.
That's a good point. So last, the power of treasure.
But he didn't stay dead.
That's right. What you treasure will shape the course of your life. And so this is where kind of you talk about the good life. And it's like, whatever you treasure, like your heart will follow. And so, one, what is that? We've kind of been talking about this. Is like what that looks like.
So let me talk about the heart. Because
I'd love to talk about the heart.
Because I think, when I first started reading some books a few years ago about this, it just revolutionized my kind of thinking about people and our decision making.
Mm-hmm.
We as modern people all across the world talk about the heart as the emotional center.
Yeah.
And we talk about the mind, the brain as the logical center. And ancient people, not just like Jews, like ancient people did not think that way. The heart was the center of a person. You thought from your heart. You felt from your heart, and or you, at least your affections were from your heart, and your will is from your heart. Your actions, all of those flow from those things. And so, what your heart, Tim Keller talks about it like this: if you imagine your heart as a throne, and whatever sits on the throne is going to lead your thinking, your affections, and your actions.
Yeah.
And so the way to change, to be someone different, is to change what's on the throne. So if money is on the throne of your heart, you're going to think about how to make more money. You're going to feel certain ways, whether you have money or don't have money, and your actions are going to be about how to get more money. And so you got to put Jesus on that throne and not other things. And so we think it's the other way. We think, oh, I can reason this person into belief. I can convince you through arguments.
Or myself. Right? It's like I can think really hard and know all the right things.
Right. Or I'll just change the way I act, I act or what I'm beholding, my affections. That's just not true. You have to see whatever Jesus or whatever the thing is as more wondrous and more captivating, the vision of the good life. You have to see it that way, and to dethrone the other thing.
Yeah, I think it's, it's taste and see that the Lord is good. It's like, look, it's not just like, hey, know the Lord is good in your head, but it's like, no, experience his goodness, and that's what gives you the knowledge that he deserves to be on the throne.
And when you understand that, it radically changes the way you read this verse about where your treasure is, there your heart will be. We think of that as like this touchy-feely thing.
Yeah.
Oh, where your treasure is, your heart is. Oh, that's so touching. Like,
put it on a towel in your house
it's like,
or whatever.
No. Whatever you think is the good life, the treasure, the thing that will make you happy, that is what you will think about, what you will feel good or bad about, and what you're going to do.
Well, you think about the...
it's going to be the steering wheel for your life, is what I said.
That's good. You think about the parable of the treasure in the field. It's like the guy, you find a treasure in a field, he goes and sells everything and buys the field, digs up the treasure. And it's like, it's actually all three of those areas in the heart, those activities of the heart. It's like, he thinks like, oh, like this is a good, this is a good idea.
Yeah.
And he's like, I desire that treasure. And like, I know it's a better investment. And so he acts, right? And so the motivation comes from all three of those things. And so we can't just like have all the right knowledge, or we can't just, and that's why like we can't just feel all the right feelings, or just do all the right things. It's like all three of those aspects have to be engaged. And I think that's hard for people. I watched a documentary one time on YouTube about when this changed, about the
when we moved from the head heart.
When would you think it happened? Because this was totally shocking to me.
My guess would be like the Enlightenment.
No, the 1960s.
What?
Because like brain scans and stuff started to be invented, and so like we knew how much activity was going on in the brain, and we started understanding computers better, and so like brains and computers like functioning like systems and synapses and all that stuff. But also this guy that I watched this documentary of talked about how the assassination of John F. Kennedy shifted people's thinking from the center of the person of the heart.
Because he was shot in the head?
Because he was shot to the head and, like died instantly. And I thought like, that is where
that's the most important part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't that fascinating?
We talk about head shots, not heart shots.
Yeah, but okay. If you watch movies from before like the mid 60s,
they get shot in the heart?
They get shot in the chest and they die.
That's fascinating.
It was...
Today it's all about the headshot.
It was fascinating. And that's really what the documentary was about. It was like, why is a headshot?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, it is fascinating.
That tracks.
The things you learn when you're studying about the heart and the head.
Scrolling on YouTube.
Yeah, whatever. So lastly, so you talk about the eternal things being people and character. I think kind of like as a wrapping up, kind of closing, what are some things that you could point to, or things that people can do if they say, Brent, I'm ready to invest in some eternal treasures. I'm ready to invest in people. I'm ready to invest in my character. I'm ready to invest in the gospel mission. Like, what would you practically point them to? I think both in like a macro level, but also in like a day-to-day.
Yeah. So both, when we're talking about how do you know if you're doing this wrongly, my answer is check your wallet and check your calendar.
Mm.
And so you want to start doing it, use your wallet and use your calendar.
Mm-hmm.
And so invest financially in the things that matter. And so that could be both giving to your church or, hey, I'm investing in this person.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to take them out to coffee, which is going to cost me some money. Or I'm going to go, they have a need. I know this person who's lost, and I know their sump pump just went out.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go pay for their sump pump, and I'm going to go replace it myself. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to go share the gospel with them.
I'm not going to do that because I don't know how to replace a sump pump, but I would pay for it.
Yeah, whatever. It's like, and so there's a financial piece there, but it's also a time piece. It's like, hey, I'm going to go invest in this person.
Which I think that's harder for people.
Oh yeah, it's easier to write. Hey, I'll buy your sump pump. Yeah, here's a check.
Yep.
But let's take this step further.
It's scarier to go talk to someone you don't know.
Yeah.
Than it is to.
We think it is. It's actually not. Once you do it,
I know, but I think on the front side.
That's what I'm saying. We think it is.
Yeah.
We are terrified on this side of the conversation, but once you get into it, you realize, oh, they're just a normal person.
Mm-hmm.
And here's like just a little aside trick.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to go up to people and just be like, hey, can I tell you about Jesus?
Mm-hmm.
You just ask them questions. Like you're getting to know them. You're going to ask them questions about, hey, what do you do? Where are you from? Do you have any family? You married? Whatever. You're going to ask all those questions, and then, hey,
do you go to church?
Do you go to church? Yeah. What do you believe about? Do you believe in God? Like you just keep
what do you
asking.
Believe about God?
Yeah. Like, do you believe in heaven? Do you believe in hell? Do you there's tons of questions like that.
Do you believe in the inerrancy of the Bible? No, I'm just kidding. Done.
And just listen. And after you've listened for a while, then you're going to get a turn to talk. And it's like, well, let me tell you what I think.
Yeah.
What I believe. And so just be a normal, friendly, talkative person and work to get to Jesus. And once you do it a few times, the problem is we haven't worked those muscles. And so those muscles are atrophied.
Yeah.
And so it's like, once you do it, you're like, oh, I can do this. And then the more you do it, the more like it's super, like I know people or read about people. I know a couple people that like are so good at this. Like they'll be in airports, they'll be in supermarkets, they're going through the checkout line and they're just like talking to the person, holding the line up, talking to the person about Jesus. And so it's like, the more you work it, the more you can do it.
And let me tell you, me and you have the easiest in of all time because all it takes is for someone to ask what we do.
Oh, dude, I love flying on a plane because I'm strapped next to somebody. And if we get to talking, that question's coming. And I go, you asked, buddy.
No, that's good. Any final words on the I was trying to make it a layup joke again, but I couldn't get there.
It's hard. That's why I didn't do it. It's hard.
The treasures in heaven layup.
Yeah. Choose the right one.
That's like a kind of, so on the Great British Bake Off, they always have like a technical challenge in the middle. That's kind of like a mystery challenge. And the judge always gives like cryptic instructions at the beginning. And it's always stuff like that. It's always like, choose the right one. And they're like, what does that mean? So, but no, I get it. Choose the right one.
Choose the right treasure. Choose the right master because it will determine the course of your life and your eternity.
Yeah. Well, thanks for joining us for the recap. We hope this conversation has encouraged you to keep striving to make Jesus essential in every aspect of your life. If you aren't part of our church family, we'd love to meet you on a Sunday morning. We gather for worship at 10:30 a.m. For more information, you can always go to myfellowship.church. Thanks for listening. Be blessed.